And I am Baje Kalinda presenting on the lesson of today, July 7th. I'm so thankful that I've gotten to take this class, this course is a very amazing course that reminds me about my social studies that I had taken some years ago during my primary school. But again, this is more articulated and more formal than the way I took this kind of history when I was young, and I couldn't like that much exactly understand what was going on. Only just getting it from the books and from my teachers by then. Uh, if if I can remember very much, as Dr. Kasuri put it from the lecture of today, it is very very clear that our ancestors, in other words, our grandparents, who were these Africans by the time before colonial rule, they were existing institutions, they were existing political institutions, they were existing economic institutions. And like I even said in our lecture today, these institutions, they were working good at the time, like in any other state or in any other continent around the globe at that time. However, with the greediness or the human nature manifestations that almost all humans manifest, as the Europeans came, they disregarded all these aspects of development, these aspects of life in Africa. Of course, like Dr. Kasuri put it today from his lecture, these were of course done in order to uh, dehumanize Africans, undermine Africans and African institutions at the time. Of course, even up to date, if I'm not mistaken, which of course again did not and have not contemporarily uh, stopped until uh, today. Looking into that kind of like I'm sorry so to say, but looking into that kind of mess, which is of course rooted from some human beings. Uh, I uphold the view of one of the great political philosophers, uh, Mr. John Locke, if either or all of us might be aware of Dr. John Locke. Dr. John Locke is a political philosopher, and um, in his contents of work that has done in the political field, he explores more about what human beings are, and he goes beyond explaining how human beings, or in other words, human nature, is in response to state's nature, in other words, country's nature. He says that when we see the problems around occurring between countries, in other words, between states, politically to say, we should not just take it from the political, just from the superficial perspective. We should understand that before states came into fights, before states came into chaos, all these we see around, there existed human nature manifestation which shaped all this. So, but I've talked much about human nature, which has shaped the state's nature or country's nature. What does John Locke say about this in his teachings or in his philosophy? John Locke says humans are always in constant need, constant urge of anything. This could be desiring somebody's wife or desiring somebody's husband, desiring somebody's cloth, desiring somebody's land, desiring somebody's, you know, anything. So, because of these kind of always desiring someone is properly, this constant desiring of somebody's possessions, it brings about this chaos we see in human beings. And then from there, it escalates to state's nature. And he says, John Locke, of course, that state's nature, which means country's nature, it is the same way as human beings. Constant desires. No matter what they have, they're not satisfied of what they have. They feel they want to have even the other ones from the other person or from the other people. So, similarly, this is what these other states, the Europeans, did to Africa. They felt not satisfied of what they had by then, and they thought of coming to Africa to get what they didn't have, and in fact, even what they had, but again, having more, no matter what they had, and that's what they did. So, what next then? Or what does John Locke say about this? John Locke says, therefore, in order to be at ease, any human being must secure his properties, his possessions. That's why you see many people, many governments, or many states have always, there's a term we use in political science, have always augmented powers, resources, all sort of, protections. Others having more sophisticated ones, others having weak ones, in order to protect their positions, in order to protect their welfare, their well-being. If not dominating invading and dominating the others. And again, guess what? There is no the world politics or the world life is not anarchy. There is no world government. So because of that, he still argues that people, states must have constant augmentation, or in other words, constant accumulation of powers to protect their well-being, their welfare, their possessions, in order to survive in this world which has no world government. In other words, which is not an anarchy society. Okay. So now, reflecting to African situation and the European invasion, that was a mess. Like everybody understands, that was a mess. However, there's nothing that Europeans did not use as regards to dehumanization and acquiring, dominating African continent. But what it becomes a very big challenge is, no, before coming to what it becomes a big challenge, remember they used weapons, they used the soft power, like they have been put, of course, by Dr. Kasuri in our lecture today. They use the traditions, they use those educational policies, they use weapons, the guns, which means it's so-called technology. They used all sort of stuffs, but they were strategically still aiming at what Africa possessed, and therefore they wanted it. They wanted them from Africans, and that they did. So, what became a very big problem is how contemporary Africans have responded, or black race, how black race have continued to handle this continued slavery from the primitive slavery to modern slavery. Some of my questions might have kind of touched on the content to Dr. Kiso today in our lecture. Our slavery has not stopped, nor has colonization stopped. Like we have understood from today's lecture about China's invasion now, although soft it is, that's a colonization too. That is colonization. Slavery has not stopped in a way that China is going on for the first wave of slavery, so rather colonization in that manner that China is doing it, although it's not from Europe but from China. That's the colonization. Then, for the slavery being still alive or being modernized, you've heard about refugee resettlement, which means a resettlement whereby there's the Western powers, the European powers, and the rest of the world come rather invade certain areas of Africa where they have anticipated minerals, and then they cause wars, they cause tribal wars, they cause what? They cause occupation by rebels, and then they found rebels. I'm a good victim of that. So after bringing rebels or finding rebels in those particular areas, then these refugees free, so these citizens free out of the country, and then they go to refugee camps. I was a victim. I spent in a refugee camp for 20 years before I got here. But where it came from, that's the place where mining has never been taking place, and you know, it's a lot of mess. So that's a modern way of slavery. So they cause wars to seem that these are people causing wars and blah blah. But in viral sense, which you come to understand that these wars are caused by the West in form of um, modern slavery that we can understand, and then we find ourselves scattered around the world that freeing our countries, freeing conflicts in our countries. China, you see what is going on. That's contemporary. That's a modern way of slavering Africa or colonizing Africa. But our leaders have not understood this, and perhaps if they have not taken this under consideration as a serious thing and work on it, not from an individual perspective, but institutional perspective, where I mean there have to be institutions that teach our history, teach about the forms of colonization from the uh, colonial time or even backward during the pre-colonial rule. Then, if this history is taught and enforced by the African institutions, not by men or by single man, then young ones will grow in protection of themselves, which means the continent. But has this happened? No. Why? Because of the organization of African leadership at the continent. That's why this has not happened. And again, those guys, the current presidents and the ever presidents, thinking for themselves, not thinking continentally, not thinking as states. Or some try to think as states, but again, that's not enough. It doesn't make sense because there's no way how a country like Rwanda or Burundi or Lesotho could go in arrangements of treaties with United States or China. It doesn't make sense. So that thinking of states in finding solutions for the continent, that's primitive and ignorantly uh, presented, or even ignorantly kind of taking things or harboring solutions for Africa as a continent. So now, what should Africans do? It's now our time, the young people, to build institutions, to focus on building institutions that stand against these forms of perpetuated colonialism. As Dr. Kasura has put it, China is well alive there. Uh, Again, other states, they are also trying to get in, sneaking little by little in all other means possible. You have had United States introducing the homosexual culture over there. That's still one way of colonizing Africa, and Africans, most of them have jubilated about that. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. How insane could Africans think about this and respond to this in a very positive manner to that extent? You had Obama in recent years, Obama going to Kenya, trying to publish these, advocate for this nasty culture of here. But again, still, to honor Obama, even there have been some impositions of some kind of cultures in the African continent as of the current. So all those are the ways of recolonizing Africa. Therefore, to second my point of what we should do as young people is to build strong institutions, cultural institutions, political institutions, economic institutions. I wish that the African continental trade would really get realized, because when Dr. Kaswe talked about the African continental trade during pre-colonial rule, I was like, wow, how wonderful was this? When I was taught this history, I was young by then and I couldn't make all these kind of, intellectual connections. But when Dr. Kasura was lecturing today, I was like, if they managed to do this kind of trade, the Afro-triangular trade, why don't we today have it formally even? Because if they did that footing, just footing, not even like using animals like the donkeys and these other transportation animals or camels, but footing. And actually, my grandparents used to tell me so about how they used to travel all those hours, traveling 14 hours plus in transportation of cash crops and other food crops. I was like, really? Wow, that was really ridiculous. Some people could die on the way. But again, if that happened, and these were economic basis of survival in Africa during pre-colonial rule, why not now that same thing happen in a formal way, that is African continental trade now in a formal way? I well know that that's plan in progress, as we have several times heard from uh, the African um, the previous African uh, chairman of United Nations, chair lady, not chairman, of course, Madam Dr. Chombole Kwar something. Uh, I think that's something that has to be in line with the pre-colonial continent, pre-colonial Afro-continental trade that can boost Africa's economy on the side of the economy. Then have, of course, one military, and it is possible. Then stop all these other trade with other countries, but other trading with Africans, African states to African states, and then from there they can go to international level. That is something that we young people and other nationalists have to work on in response to this second wave of this continued wave of colonialism in this modern world of today. Uh, Thank you so much for the lecture of today. It has been so amazing, but something I shouldn't forget is that even Mr. Marcus Garvey, the black nationalist ever existed among the rest, he put it clear: this is not an easy struggle. This is not an easy struggle, and it is possible to be done it's possible that Africa can unite and Africa can become a world power as well. However, it needs tremendous sacrifice, tremendous understanding of ourselves. Therefore, we cannot understand ourselves if we cannot understand the history of ourselves. There has been brainwash of ourselves, the young ones, like you have seen, and like Mr. Kasure put it clear today about how colonialism starts and the ends. Brainwash is one way. We have seen through this modern slavery, people coming here, social media manipulating our younger generation, and then these people who are claiming African identity not only physical but also by blood, not only by blood but also by psychology. And then with that given, you find that colonialism is live and well. So these people start fighting themselves uh, against their culture, against um, their history, against their everything almost, forgetting that not very far, but in the near future, they can as well become the victims of the politics around. And history has demonstrated clearly that I can. You have seen how African Americans, which means black race, is being treated and has been treated since the slavery time and up to date. So that's a one way to show them the African descent and the Africans generally here, or black race generally here, that you have to understand yourselves, your history, and then define your history, which means fight for yourselves. Fighting for ourselves does not mean we just stay entangled in the United States and quarrel here and there, rather uniting as a black race and then deform the colonization systems that we well understand that existed and still exist. And there we end up building our continent. Thank you so much. That's what I would say regarding the analysis or the evaluation, so rather the reflection of today's lecture. I had loved to put my reflection in writing, but it's kind of like a little bit crazy in a way that I work night, 10 hours of night. So from 6 to 5, and then from there I sleep some few hours, then to get into class. Um, then from class, I have to figure out something to eat. And then from something to eat, I need at least to resume some little sleep again, and of course work on this paper. I work 5 days, but it seems like I need to have some offs if they will be, of course, granted to me, and then I can be putting my reflections in writings. I would love to put them in writings. Although again, it won't be one page. It'll be like more pages. Because when I get to write, I mean, it becomes a lot of content to put on paper, given uh, the knowledge, the knowledge around the content and the context. All right.